So we're here outside JP Morgan, and there's people dressed as doctors here. Let me just ask what's going on. Hi, could you tell us what's going on here today?
Hi, so we are Dr. Sferixar, and we're here because JPMorgan is the #1 investor bank for fossil fuels. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's 33% more than the next bank, and it's over £250 billion that they invest in fossil fuels. It's absolutely ridiculous. They've got greenwashing on their site saying that they are in accordance with the Paris agreements, but they're not. And so we are protesting that because we need to do something about this. This climate emergency is a health emergency, and we as healthcare professionals feel that it is our duty to do something about this. So that's why we're here.
So we're at one of the large JP Morgan buildings. Could I see your sign, please? Is that... So lots of requests for JP Morgan. Can I ask what your job is?
I'm a doctor, junior doctor.
And how do you feel about the climate emergency?
It's horrendous. I'm always finding out more and more things that is being caused by the climate emergency. For example, I recently found out that stillbirths are increased by air pollution. So before babies are even coming into the world, some of them are being killed. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. How are we doing this to the environment? How are we doing this to ourselves?
And is this part of a group? Is this XR doctors or? Yeah. And why did you get involved in Extinction Rebellion?
This is the first thing that I've done. And I think I was just frustrated with all of the talking and none of the action. We just need to do something, and the time for talking is over. And this is still a peaceful protest, despite what lots of people may think. But as you can see, we're getting the message out there, and hopefully people will listen, especially JP Morgan.
Thank you very much.
If I just take a small units for level 1, this is something that we do.
No fossil fuel exploration is required, and no new oil and natural gas fields are required beyond those that have already been approved for development. No new coal mines or mine extensions are required either. A focus on fossil expansion is justified by the fact that potential emissions from oil and gas coal reserves already in production more than exhaust a 2-degree carbon budget, let alone 1.5. Even if coal use ended overnight, oil and gas currently in production would exhaust the 1.5 budget. However, according to the Rystad Energy projections, most of the oil majors still intend to significantly increase their oil and gas production between now and 2030, based on the assets they currently hold and are planning to sanction. This is a worrying statistic. But given JP Morgan Chase's incumbent position as the #1 financier of fossil fuel expansion, it's invested $143 billion in the top 100 companies expanding fossil fuels since the Paris Agreement. It has genuine power to leverage change in the sector. This is actually a huge opportunity for JP Morgan Chase to turn from climate laggards to climate leaders. JP Morgan Chase may be increasingly vulnerable to climate legal action. You may be aware that Royal Dutch Shell was recently found guilty in a Dutch court and ordered to comply with the Paris Agreement. They have now been legally compelled to produce an ambitious target which they had not produced voluntarily. In this, there are clear similarities with JP Morgan Chase. Royal Dutch Shell had, like JP Morgan Chase, claimed to be Paris-aligned. Royal Dutch Shell had, like Morgan Chase, insisted on using carbon intensity targets and rejected absolute emission targets. However, the court found that Shell's climate policy was not concrete and is full of conditions, and that is not enough.
So we've got a die-in here of doctors, midwives, nurses, psychologists.
Is therefore that Shell is in danger of violating its obligation to reduce.
outside
and the court will
JP
therefore
Morgan.
issue an order upon RDS, the judge said. This ruling clearly demonstrates that polluting corporations take on risk when their words obfuscate their actions and their actions are insufficient. What would we like you to do? With the above in mind, we would ask JPMorgan Chase to consider three things. First, we ask that JPMorgan Chase urgently update their carbon compass to fit with the International Energy Agency's comprehensive net zero by 2050 report. Second, we ask that you set an additional absolute emissions target to add to your carbon intensity target. A fair target would be a 50% absolute emissions reduction by 2030, in keeping with thousands of companies who have already joined the UN-backed Race to Zero. Third, we ask you to make ending expansion of fossil fuels, including frontier, new plays and near-field exploration, and commitment to genuine emission reduction, a precondition for doing business with JPMorgan Chase. Thank you for listening.
More police arriving. Coming out of the van.
This letter is signed by Dr. Claire Andrews, General Practitioner, Jim Arledge, Consultant Anaesthetist, Dr. Christelle Blunden, GP, Anna Bunton, Advanced Nurse Practitioner, Gail Clay, Retired Clinical Specialist Nurse, Dr. Amelia Cussons, Psychiatry Trainee, Margaret Fay, Dementia Specialist Nurse, Lizzie Harris, Consultant Clinical Geneticist, Joe Hindley, Registered Midwife, Dr. Eleanor Jacob, GP, Dr. Lynn Jones, OBE, Child and Adolescent Psychiatrist, Dr. Helen Angel, GP, Dr. Harriet Wilkie, Paediatric Registrar, Dr. Juliet Brown, Consultant Psychiatrist, Steve Burrow, Occupational Therapist, Dr. Eleanor Cook, Psychiatry Registrar, Dr. Karen Edgerton, Clinical Psychologist, Francesca Hanks, Registered Midwife, Dr. Patrick Hart, GP, Dr. Rita Issa, GP, Miles Jordan, NHS Administrator, Dr. Cliff Kendall, GP, Dr. Camilla Kingsley, GP Registrar, Dr. Lauren McDonnell, Psychiatry Registrar, Dr. Jennifer McCarthy, General Practitioner, Andrea Montu, Trainee Nurse, Dr. Angela Nicholas, Child and Adolescent Psychiatrist, Dr. Hayley Pinto, Consultant Psychiatrist, Dr. Emma Radcliffe, GP, Tracy Lyons, Pharmacist, Dr. Chloe Sakal, Psychiatry Registrar, Dr. Kirsten Schuckler, Consultant Psychiatrist, Dr. Will Stapleforth, Consultant Gastroenterologist, Mr. Andrew Stevenson, Consultant Orthopaedic Surgeon, Dr. Robin Stott, Retired Physician and former Medical Director of Lewisham Hospital, Vicky Sullivan, Registered Midwife, Jill Turner, Paediatrician, Sarah Yap, Social Prescriber, Juliet Kirkwood, Registered Nurse, Dr. T. Matthews, Public Health Doctor, Dr. David McKelvey, General Practitioner, Dr. Chris Newman, General Practitioner, Dr. Mangala Patel, Consultant Physician, Dr. J. Perkis, Psychiatry Specialty Doctor, Dr. Rosa Roberts, Psychiatry Registrar, Ali Rowe, Registered Mental Health Nurse, Dr. H.S. Tao, Consultant in Intensive Care, Dr. Darch Smith, Psychiatry Registrar, Adele Stanton, Occupational Therapist, Dr. Duncan Still, GP, Dr. Grace Thompson, GP, Louise Weissel, Occupational Therapist, Dr. C. Zolman, GP.
XR doctors on a die-in outside JP Morgan.
I would like to add that recently UNICEF published a report into the climate health impacts on children around the world. As healthcare professionals, we are constantly exhorted to look out for the welfare of children. If the patient in front of you is a parent or has care of children, we're asked to consider, is there any risk to that child? And if we believe there is, to act. So when we read a report that tells us that a quarter of children are now exposed to coastal or river flooding, that a quarter of children are highly exposed to vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue fever, that a quarter of all children are exposed to damage from cyclones and storms, that 1 in 3 children are exposed to danger from extreme heat waves, and 1 in 3 from water scarcity, that 90% of the world's children are breathing air which exceeds the WHO limits for safety, and nearly half are breathing extremely harmful levels of toxic pollution. We know that climate change is a safeguarding issue. Children are more vulnerable. They breathe faster than adults. Their bodies are unable to cope with toxins in the same way that adults are. So when they are breathing in more of the toxic air, that has a huge impact on the development of their organs, from their lungs to their brains. Children are less able to regulate their body temperature, so they are more at risk in extreme heat waves. They are more at risk if they find themselves in flood water. They are less likely to be able to swim, and they are more vulnerable to the effects of infections. So when we see these figures, we know that as healthcare professionals, we have a duty to act. And we know that the root cause of all of these health harms to children is fossil fuel burning. And we know that what is supporting that is the funding which is coming from institutions like JPMorgan Chase. So if I was in my clinic and I saw a child being harmed in this way, and I knew the individuals responsible, I would consider them guilty of child abuse or neglect. And that is why we are here today, to hold JPMorgan Chase accountable for the abuse and neglect of almost an entire generation of children around the world. We ask you to rethink. Most of you who are making these decisions have children of your own or children that you care about. Please start connecting the dots and rethink what you are doing. That is why we are here today, to make a peaceful protest, to try to make you think harder about what you are doing. Albert Einstein once said that the world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. We are here today to show that we are not prepared to stand by without doing anything. And I urge all of you listening, do you want to be a bystander in this? Or do you want to act? Thank you.
So I could move around a bit. Do the whole thing again.
In the bag, in my bag. Can we take them out? Can you have to get them out? There's a few sets. There's a few sets. Should be in the folder that's on the floor. Stickers in there.
There's the letter in there as well.
Letters in there as well. There's another copy of it.
Does anyone want to talk to camera?
So it's facing you, so if you turn it to face.
Do you want to stand?
Yeah.
So this is XR doctors are doing a die-in outside JPMorgan's Canary Wharf. We've got midwives, psychologists, nurses, doctors, GPs. Sure.
Why 50 or so health professionals have taken days off work early morning to come and lie on the floor outside their office? So this letter is to Mr. Jamie Dimon. He is the CEO and the chairman of JPMorgan Chase. Dear Mr. Dimon, a large group of health professionals have come to your offices today at 25 Bank Street, Canary Wharf, including surgeons, physicians, psychiatrists, midwives, nurses, occupational therapists, general practitioners, and other National Health Service workers. We have come to tell JPMorgan Chase, and specifically its leadership team, that we are gravely concerned about how the climate crisis is affecting the physical and mental health of our patients, communities, and ourselves. No doubt you have heard some of the evidence from the latest UN climate report, labelled as Code Red for Humanity by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and seen news broadcasts about the human cost of extreme weather events, which are being increasingly amplified in frequency and magnitude by climate change. The dramatic impacts of hurricanes and wildfires are most often reported, but it's the indirect effects which are most concerning. Failed harvests due to altered rainfall patterns and heat waves bring famine, then conflict, and then flight. This is illustrated by what is happening today in Somalia and Central America, where populations are fleeing northwards because they can no longer feed their children. A recent UNICEF report 2 weeks ago revealed a harrowing statistic. Half of the world's children, that's 1 billion children, live in areas classified as extremely high risk from climate change. It is, of course, a complex problem, and with any complex problem, the key is to get to the root cause and prevent it before it can get out of control. With climate change, this root cause is undoubtedly the massive overconsumption of fossil fuels, and JPMorgan Chase are by far the biggest funder of their extraction. So it should be no surprise that today we have come here asking you to take further concerted action on this topic. JPMorgan uses out-of-date models. They have stated clear support for 2050 net zero targets. So it's surprising and disappointing to see them use models
Discussions going on there.
2070 net zero target. To explain, JPMorgan Chase's flagship Carbon Compass methodology, which is how they try to work towards their carbon goals, adopts an old International Energy Agency Sustainable Development Scenario, which aims to achieve net zero CO2 emissions by 2070. By extension, JPMorgan Chase's net zero target can also be assumed to be 2070. To contrast this, 1 in 5 of the world's largest 2,000 public companies have already committed to net zero by 2050, and every major nation that has set a net zero target thus far has chosen 2050 or earlier, except China, who have aimed for 2060. Just to clarify, JPMorgan's models use a target of 2070. JPMorgan Chase say that they strive for excellence and do not settle for mediocrity. So it is disappointing to see JPMorgan Chase settle for such mediocrity and lag so far behind everyone else.
they set misleading targets. One of the keys to the Paris Agreement is a single unified metric known as absolute emission reductions targets, which are accounted for every 5 years in what is known as a global stocktake. This is being successfully driven by the UN-backed Race to Zero, through which thousands of companies have already committed to an absolute emissions target reduction of 50% by 2030. This single unified metric is important, very important, for transparency and simplicity, and prevents intentional or unintentional obfuscation of the facts. However, JPMorgan Chase has chosen to not use absolute emission reductions target and instead use carbon intensity targets. They may have some merit, but when used on their own, they prevent comparison, inhibit coordination, and impede accountability. This seems to go against several of JPMorgan Chase's own business principles, which say act in a thoughtful, coordinated way, not in haste or in isolation, and be accountable, straightforward, and honest in all your dealings. Some have even accused JPMorgan Chase of a convoluted accountancy trick, which would allow them to claim success without making the recommended reductions in their absolute emissions. Some might wonder if JPMorgan Chase were trying to hide something. This surely poses a risk to your reputation. The easiest way for JPMorgan Chase to address this is simple. They can bring in accountable, straightforward, and honest targets, applying an absolute carbon emission target to their current methodology. There are also some concerning statistics. A recent in-depth and very damning report on banking and fossil fuels demonstrated that JPMorgan Chase is the world's biggest investor in fossil fuels, to the tune of $317 billion. That's $317 billion since the Paris Agreement in 2016, as in just the last 4 years. Given that it was reported widely by Bloomberg, CTAM, Forbes, etc., and there has been no libel action since by JPMorgan Chase, we can only assume these figures are accurate. The new and comprehensive roadmap to net zero by 2050 by the International Energy Association, who have long been a conservative organization, who have long sided with the oil and gas corporations. They released their roadmap just 5 days after JP Morgan's own carbon compass model, and it's very clear on what is needed for the energy sector to transition. The IEA said, no fossil fuel exploration is required, and no new oil and natural gas fields are required beyond those that have already been approved for development. No new coal mines or mine extensions are required either. That's a statement from the world's foremost association on energy development. A focus on fossil expansion is justified by the fact that potential emissions from oil, gas and coal reserves already in production more than exhaust the 2-degree carbon budget, let alone the 1.5-degree target. And even if coal use ended overnight, oil and gas currently in production would exhaust the 1.5-degree C budget. However, according to the Rystad energy projections, most of the oil majors still intend to significantly increase their oil and gas production between now and 2030, based on the assets they currently hold and are planning to sanction. This is a concerning statistic, but given JPMorgan Chase's incumbent position as the #1 financier of fossil fuel expansion, it has invested £143 billion in the top 100 companies expanding fossil fuels since the Paris Agreement. It has genuine power to leverage change in the sector. This is actually a huge opportunity for JP Morgan to turn from climate laggards to climate leaders. On JP Morgan Chase's legal vulnerabilities, JP Morgan Chase may be increasingly vulnerable to climate legal action. You may have heard that Royal Dutch Shell was recently found guilty in a Dutch court and ordered to comply with the Paris Agreement. They have now been legally compelled to produce an ambitious target which they had not produced voluntarily. In this, there are clear similarities with JPMorgan Chase, the bank behind us. Royal Dutch Shell had, like JPMorgan Chase, claimed to be Paris-aligned. Royal Dutch Shell had, like JPMorgan Chase, insisted on using carbon intensity targets and rejected absolute emissions targets. However, the court found that Shell's climate policy was not concrete and full of conditions. That's not enough. The conclusion of the court is therefore that Shell was in danger of violating its obligation to reduce, and they ordered Dutch Shell to massively reduce their carbon emissions. This ruling clearly demonstrates that polluting corporations take on a risk when their words obfuscate their actions and their actions are insufficient. JPMorgan, what we would like you to do with the above in mind is to consider three things. Firstly, we ask that you urgently update your carbon compass methodology to fit with the International Energy Agency's comprehensive net zero by 2050 report. Secondly, we ask that you set an additional absolute emissions target to add to your carbon intensity target. A fair one would be a 50% absolute emissions reduction by 2030 at least, in keeping with thousands of companies who have already joined the UN race to zero. Third, we ask you to make expansion of fossil fuels, including frontier nucleus and near-field exploration, and commitment to genuine emissions reduction, a precondition for doing business with JPMorgan Chase. Yours sincerely, all the doctors, nurses, midwives, surgeons, psychiatrists, psychologists, and other healthcare workers who are currently risking arrest with the police. Thank you very much.
Well, some stood. So you want the walking mask? Yeah. So now you've finished your speech, we're asking people to...
Okay, everyone. So, right now, if you're wondering where we are, we're outside JPMorgan. This is where healthcare professionals here, around 60 of them.
Just like the police.
We're hearing from one of them now.
In our professional roles, we are used to working positively with the police. So we do not take the law lightly. We are here because the situation...
So this lady, one of the healthcare professionals, is trying to speak, but the police think healthcare is obviously not a priority and are moving her out the way. This is security from Canary Wharf. What we see often is when these protests affect some of the wealthier people, they're cleared away a lot quicker. This is definitely a good example of that. And what we're seeing right now is surgeons being manhandled. Is this how you feel doctors should be treated? This lady is a surgeon. She's dedicated her life to healthcare, to making sure that the people in her care are treated safely. And this is the kind of treatment that she is being received. Now, if you don't need any more stark warning that this is a health crisis and that police are directly getting in the way of protecting people's health, one of these police officers in front of me is laughing. That's clearly how he feels about the climate crisis and the integrity of these doctors who are saying that if the alarm wasn't possible enough to be heard using the IPCC report, which is a report produced by scientists around the world that are saying, look, we need to do something, then please listen to the doctors. But apparently not this police officer. He's quite happy to drag her off and silence her, like the many other protesters that unfortunately have been peeled away from the front of the spaces and buildings that are hosting climate breakdown. Now this nurse, I can hear she's saying,
this man is hurting me. I'm here because I'm a healthcare professional. I'm really worried about what's happening to my patients.
Can I stand up, please? Thank you.
Colleagues just now, if you didn't hear that, she said, I'm here because I'm worried about the health of my patients, and this man is hurting me.
People dying every year from fossil fuel pollution, and I have a duty of care to my patients. It is really important that we stop fossil fuel pollution. This is a code red climate emergency. I have a duty of care to my patients. I am not leaving until that duty of care is acknowledged by JPMorgan. I am not going, and you are hurting me. Can somebody pick my koala up, please?
Your which one?
My koala. you are hurting me by dragging me. I am a nurse. My name is Maggie Fay, and I am an NMC registered dementia specialist nurse. Many people die every year from dementia because of fossil fuel pollution. I'm going back.
Well, then you need to hold on then. We're hurting.
Yep.
Now, what are you watching? Are you watching? Are you watching old crusties lying in a road, refusing to move? No, you're watching healthcare professionals who are saying that this is a climate crisis and a health crisis. That's what we're watching right now. This is who we're watching being dragged off. These are doctors, psychiatrists, nurses, people who look after us that are saying that it's been their experience that the climate crisis being ignored by companies like this, which is exacerbating the climate crisis. Do you have anything to say?
Yes, the climate crisis is a crisis that is a health crisis, and we need to act now. And JPMorgan and other financiers like them need to stop funding fossil fuels. This is our future. This is my future. This is my child's future. And JPMorgan and the other financiers need to start making action now. Now. Now.
Thank you. That's powerful. That's a psychiatrist being dragged off over there, covered in chalk, where Code Red was written on the ground with that chalk just behind me here. Now, they're not leaving by choice. They're being pulled away by Canary Wharf security and police. This is a double team of people tearing away, people trying to say this is a medical health emergency. JPMorgan, in reports. Do you want to say anything? You're live on XR. Is there anything you want to say?
I want to say you need to stop funding fossil fuels. It's going to kill everyone. It's killing our children. Killing children in the global south.
Watch out for this.
That's it. You alright?
Let's keep going. This is really a yo-yo, isn't it, between these places? Oh my goodness. Is this how do you feel about our healthcare professionals being treated like this? This is appalling. It's appalling to see anyone being treated like this. I'm outraged. How are you feeling? What does it feel like watching this? Knowing that these people are the people that are experiencing the consequences of the climate crisis right now. Do you have anything to say? You're live on Extinction Rebellion's mainstream. Do you want to say anything?
Excuse me, can you just let us pass, please?
I'm moved off private property by the police, and it's a disgrace. I'm here to protest because children and others are suffering terribly from climate change, and I'm told that I'm not even allowed to walk on private property these days.
Oh my goodness. And just behind you, are you a doctor today? Yeah.
I am a doctor. Well, I'm retired. I'm obviously fairly retired,
Can you please let the officers through, please? Thank you very much.
I'm obviously walking backwards.
No, that's fine. But
is there anything that you wanted to say, either of you together?
Good morning.
As you're dragged away?
It's not a really very helpful thing, this is it. Here I am being manhandled by the police in London. It's not right, not fair, or reasonable.
Is this proportionate?
No, I don't think it is. Presumably, Morgan Chase will be held to account for what they're doing. I sincerely hope they will be, because they are responsible for the major investment in fossil fuels, and clearly that's damaging our health. And clearly, we are all, as a doctor, I feel responsible. I feel committed to do something about it.
Now, as a doctor, could you tell us the gravity of the consequences of fossil fuel extraction on public health?
Well, there are immediate consequences. Fire, flood, and water. But more importantly, there are long-term consequences. Children are really dying all over the world already. Starving, food shortages, migration, all sorts of horrible things are happening.
It's appalling, isn't it? It's really appalling. What could anyone do that's outraged by what's happening today?
Sorry?
What could anyone do who's outraged by what's happening today?
Do the same as we're doing. Protest. Exercise our power to induce government and all the corporates to do much more than they're doing now on climate change. That's what we have to do. Generate a real momentum across society, protest against what's happening here and elsewhere. We have to be carbon zero by 2040, or otherwise we're going to be in big trouble.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. Now, these people here look a bit shocked. They've been dragged out and manhandled by police. Right now, let's have a look at what we see. We see 4 doctors. We can see a midwife, and I can never say that word, anaesthetist, midwife, occupational therapist, another one over there. We've got a surgeon too. This is outrageous. These are the people that look after us. These are the people that we respect perhaps more than anyone. The lady behind you who's been dragged by her hands and feet has got code red written on her chest. These are not uncooperative crusties talking about this. These are healthcare professionals literally telling you that the science is factual. This is factual from their experience of the medical reality of this. We've got another person being dragged back over here. She's already been dragged over here once. She stood up and walked back over there. This is the consequences of messing with companies with a lot of financial impacts. They host themselves as one of the world's leading financial investing companies. And is this the case? Is this what you expect from somebody who considers themselves an expert or somebody to be respected? This is embarrassing. What an embarrassment to JPMorgan. What a state of a company. I'm absolutely appalled that this place has any place here in Britain, and that these people that are dragging them off have a place either. These people go to the doctors, these people go to nurses, these people that are dragging these people away from here rely on our medical services to be able to thrive in this world, and yet they are ignoring their critical warning that everybody is at risk if we do not do something. This is absolutely abhorrent. Let's speak to some of the people that have been dragged away now. Does anyone have anything they want to say before I cry? Yes, please, thank you. So there's a GP just here who's going to speak to you. He's one of the people who've been dragged away from the front of JPMorgan here in Canary Wharf. If you are in the area, please come and show your support. If you are online, please show your support. Comment, share this video with at least 5 people. We need to get this message out there. This is so important. So can I pass over to you now to say something?
Of course, thank you. Today, 50 or 60 health professionals have come to JPMorgan. We've taken time off. We've come here really early. And we want to get the message across to JPMorgan that what they're doing is not enough. And also what they're doing is harmful. Like many organizations, they hide behind statistics and confusing statements, essentially. What they do is they use misleading targets, and they use something called, sorry, there's a train going overhead. Like many companies, they say they want a 2050 target, 2050 net zero target. But what they actually use is they use a model that aims for a 2070 net zero target. And they do all this whilst hiding behind language. 2070 net zero target is way behind. It's 10 years later than China. They use an old model by the International Energy Association, which we found. It's called the Sustainable Development Scenario. You can look it up. They claim that they have a revolutionary thing called the Carbon Compass methodology. And what that does, and since then, that has been massively updated by a recent report by the International Energy Agency called Roadmap to Net Zero 2050, which is far more ambitious. They released their own methodology 5 days before the IEA's new Net Zero 2050. I would suspect that they knew that that report was going to come out and then release their report before that in order to not be judged by a Net Zero 2050 target. I suspect they did this knowingly. We know how much climate change is going to affect us all. We know that things are getting worse, and we know that companies need to step up and stop misleading everyone. JPMorgan are they are the dirtiest bank, in essence, because they fund $317 billion worth of fossil fuel companies. And that's just since in the last 4 years. It's the most in the entire world by 33%, roughly. They're the most polluting bank, and it's really shameful that they're posing as being sustainable, and yet they're doing more than anyone else to ruin the planet that we live on, ruin the lives of our children, our families, and our patients. And we just want people to know what's happening, and we want JPMorgan workers to know what's happening. We want people to look at them and consider what's happening, and we want them to drive them to do further change. It's not enough. It's not fast enough. And JPMorgan, Mr. Jamie Dimon, the CEO, the chairman, please.
Right, now they're attacking press officers and photographers. What does this say about this financial situation? What does this say about the police? What does this say about the people that are protecting this country? It's absolutely appalling. It's appalling. Now, just to read a statement. Sorry, this is really upsetting. My dad has got cancer, and the doctors that have treated him are incredible. I don't mind if you film me, that's okay. These are people to be respected. If you're in an urgent situation, who do you go to? These people. And these are the people around us that are just totally disrespecting that. These people have been dragged by their limbs into this space away from protesting outside a company. That, just to describe what they say on their website, they say, we aim to be the most respected financial services firm in the world, serving corporations and individuals in more than 100 companies. That's more than 100 companies that are experiencing the devastation of this shit show over here, excuse my language. And these people who are healthcare professionals who are experiencing the health crisis that is the climate crisis, this is interlinked, are being ignored. There's a report called A Fig Leaf for Fossil Expansion, which is written by the Rainforest Action Network in May in 2021, assessing JPMorgan Chase's 2030 climate targets. And in it, they said that JPMorgan released 2030 targets as part of its Paris-aligned financing commitment. And these are intensity-only targets for oil and gas, power and autos, and say they are fully compatible with fully compatible with expansion of fossil fuels, and threaten to rubber stamp increases in absolute emissions, as this initial analysis shows, coming from the number one banker of fossil fuels. This is the number one banker of fossil fuels. This is what happens when you target the heart of the climate crisis. You realise how riddled it is with total corruption. The people who are facilitating this are the police officers in yellow, are the security guards in black. This is the people that you can see around us. I'm absolutely outraged, and you should be too. Please share this total corruption with the people that you can. It should be shared to your family, your friends, your sisters, brothers, your husbands, your wives, your children, to see this. This is outrageous. These are the people that look after us. These are healthcare workers. We've been learning about the statistics. I'm bored of talking about the statistics of the climate crisis. We know about them. They've been around for so long. We know we've lost 68% of the world's wildlife in the last 40 years. We know that every year millions and millions of people are dying because of extreme heat and cold. We know that people in the UK are dying of air pollution in their tens of thousands per year. This is outrageous, and let's see if we can talk to anybody down here, because this needs to come from them. This can't come from me, and they're trying to be silenced, or they're being silenced by these people in yellow. And let's change that now. Is there anyone who wants to talk? Yeah? Amazing.
I've got some notes here because it's hard to remember what to say. But me and my colleague, we're both midwives. And so I'm a midwife. And I've been a midwife for 30 years, over 30 years, for more than 1,000 mothers and babies. I've welcomed them, new beings, into the world. A midwife is for life, not just for birth, like a dog was not just for Christmas, it's for life. And a government should have long-term view, not just short-term. And an investment should be for life, not for just short-term profit. I'm a Quaker, and I have testimonies to peace and simplicity, and discerning what love requires. At Britain Yearly Meeting this year, Quakers in Britain, our epistle said, "We have no time but this present time." living equality and truth in a time of crisis, that we must not despair, grieve this earth, our home. We need to act with urgency and imagination. I'm inspired by Layla Saad to be a good ancestor. Intersectionality is key to the climate crisis. And me and white supremacy and the privilege that as a white person I have, I'm using that privilege here today. I'm also inspired by Valerie Kaur, the author of See No Stranger, who promotes the path of revolutionary love for deep solidarity with Indigenous peoples, with people who are having their civil rights violated, their lands taken away. JPMorgan finances and underwrites the companies that are building the tar sands pipeline and the pipelines from the coast of British Columbia through Indigenous lands. I'm in solidarity with those people. Valerie Kaur talks about using the metaphor of birthing and midwifery. So I'm breathing and pushing in my protest here. I'm here for the babies I and my colleagues have with their mothers laboured for. When I attend a birth, I often feel like I've given birth myself. It's vicariously hard work. Precious lives coming into the world. Perhaps I've been a midwife for your child, for your grandchild, or for you. I care about each of you. There are far more people on the planet now than ever before, and more coming through every day, every hour, every minute. Many current birthing parents are shockingly unaware of the burden bestowed on newborns in this era of the climate and ecological emergency. Others are acutely aware, and many potential parents are foregoing parenthood through birth strife, as the future is too precarious, uncertain, already downright dangerous. But most people have no information about this. In biblical times, the midwives prevented the slaughter of innocents, as Pharaoh commanded that all boy babies should be killed at birth. The midwives saved lives. Well, I'm doing my bit in these times. I'm here with Code Red for Humanity, chalk spray, Code Red. I also hold up my hand for 5 times more for black women who are 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy and childbirth in the UK because of unconscious bias and a system that is skewed
And we're just
to not support them properly. So I feel that we are all complicit in this crime that is being committed by investments, by our money. It's complicated. Women this week from XR targeted another JPMorgan centre bank, and we're here again, and we support their action. I think that's all I want to say now.
Thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate it. I hope you're just joining us now. We are alongside the offices of JPMorgan. It's been a bit of an emotional one today because what is under attack is the health workers we have around us and their right to protest as well as everybody else's. Today they've been trying to say outside JPMorgan, we know you're the biggest investor in fossil fuels, and that's not okay, and it's causing a crisis for enormous moves. Now, it's not just healthcare workers here, there's also photographers trying to capture it, and they're being attacked just as the police are. So please, if you're going to listen to anything, please make it be this. I know sometimes it's hard when you can't relate to somebody that you see on the media. But this is everyone across the spectrum. Literally, what we're looking at right now is the heart of corruption. We saw this last year, or the year before that, when banks were targeted. Suddenly, all areas of protest were. Oh, here we go. Let's have a look. All areas of protest were heavily taken down. That's what happens when you impact a place with so much money and financial influence. Now, normally we wouldn't focus so much on arrest, but this is really important to see. We've got doctors here, nurses, midwives, psychiatrists, GPs. We've got people across the spectrum behind us, next to us, that have been peeled away from the ground in front of JPMorgan, because, let's be honest, it's total, it looks at their total disregard for the climate, and how embarrassing is that? Imagine being associated with JPMorgan at this time. What an absolutely disgusting company. Do you want to be associated by them? Now, as well as all these doctors, we're also surrounded by the facts. We've got every person here is holding a sign. We can read some of those signs now. We've got fossil fuel pollution causes 1 in 5 premature deaths globally. Did you know that? JPMorgan is the world's #1 investor in harmful fossil fuels. We knew that. There should be no investment in new fossil fuel supply projects. Why? Well, exactly because of the signs they're holding, because this is a medical emergency, because this affects all of us. And that is absolutely unacceptable to have such willful ignorance of life. We've spoken to a GP so far. We've also spoken to a midwife. In the distance, you can see the police are really trying to get them by the train station. They don't want JPMorgan associated with this. Let me tell you, this is something we need to make sure everybody is aware of. If you have any sort of social platform in any way, if you have any contacts to anybody who respects nurses, doctors, psychiatrists, midwives, occupational therapists, anyone that supports the healthcare system that we rely on so greatly, please talk to them, use hashtags, nudge our health secretary, talk to the people in power, say, what on earth are we doing? I watched this morning and this was appalling. Is this how we want us to be treated? How have we gotten to the state where this feels appropriate? As well as doctors here, we've got scientists as well. That's Caroline just walking around the outskirts there. We might see if we can talk to her, but let's talk to another person here. You were interrupted. Did you want to speak again? Did you want to speak again? Because I know you were interrupted before you were able to finish your speech. You were pushed away. Would you like to? Is that something that...
I could talk about the UNICEF report again.
Yeah. Did we hear from this doctor before? Or
no, if you're going to talk to Terry.
Talk to Terry, okay. Thank you very much. Let's talk to Terry. Sorry. I've got another doctor appearing here again. Where are we? We're in Canary Wharf outside JPMorgan, come down if you can. So, and thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been what a morning. I'm so shocked. Are you shocked by this?
Well, this was my second attempt to get in here today. We were stopped by police and searched earlier and escorted from the area. So we didn't witness what are clearly upsetting scenes directly outside JPMorgan. But I can see a lot of people are deeply upset by what's happened, and I know some people have been injured by the action of security personnel here.
Now, a lot of people like to discredit movements like Extinction Rebellion because they're often, it's hard to sometimes associate yourself with people that you might consider sitting in a road or being willing to disrupt. Doctors probably wouldn't be one of those people. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here specifically.
Okay, well, I'm a public health doctor, and I've also worked in parts of the global south, in South Asia and the South Pacific. And I know that already children in particular and mothers in those really poor countries in the global south are already seeing extreme effects from climate change. Only very recently UNICEF produced a report estimating that half of the world's children, that's an astonishing figure, 1 billion children are at extremely high risk of significant harm due to their existing vulnerabilities and the effects of climate change. And having worked with communities in Nepal, I'm deeply aware of how the effects and impacts of climate change, on top of their already impoverished situation, is an absolutely dire threat. But it's not only in the global south that UNICEF are saying that our children are at risk.
Let's just wait 1 second for the train to pass. Okay, now let's go continue.
Okay. Several of us here held an emergency child protection meeting outside of the Bank of England a couple of days ago, where we highlighted the risk to the UK's children. And what UNICEF said about the United Kingdom's children is that they are at high risk from the effects of climate change and existing vulnerabilities. And I think part of that reflects how unequal our society is, but also the fact that climate change is also happening here. And a particular threat to our children here is that of air pollution. So the same fossil fuels that are driving climate change are also poisoning our populations, and particularly our children as they're young and developing. So we concluded that the UK government was not acting as a responsible parent should do in looking after its own children. They have failed to even keep within their own air pollution guideline limits, and those limits are actually well above the WHO recommended limits, which, following the death of young Alan Kissy Deborah, one of the coroner's recommendations was that the UK government should adopt those guidelines, and they have refused to do so far. So our children remain at risk from illegal levels of air pollution, and these same levels of air pollution are being generated by burning fossil fuels that are driving climate change. And that's why we're outside JPMorgan today, because they are the world's largest funder of continuing extraction of fossil fuels that's driving our planet to disaster.
Why? That's my question. Why? I don't understand why there's so much literature at this point explaining not only who is doing this, but also the consequences. You speak to doctors here. It's honestly sometimes, a few years ago, if you were involved in the climate movement, you would kind of be wondering why there aren't more medical professionals knocking on the door of politicians and big investors like this, or the biggest investor in fossil fuel companies, and saying, you know, we are respected people. Not that you shouldn't respect anybody else, you absolutely should, but unfortunately the way the world works, you know, the doctors and people who, everyone needs doctors at some point. You guys are absolutely fundamental to the way our world works. I just don't understand why companies and people, because we talk about companies like they're not people. Like there's not people behind them. There's absolutely people behind these enormous, disgusting companies, like the atrocious building we're standing next to us right now, JPMorgan. Why, in your opinion, are they still doing what they're doing? I want to ask you that on two fronts. Why is it, do you think, that our governments aren't taking on the advice, like you said, as a result of horrific incidences where a child has died and others are known to die as a result of pollution and things like that? Is my first question. And then we're going to move on to JPMorgan. So if you could talk first about why you think that governments have not adopted the recommendations of scientists, and also more so from your perspective, the medical profession, on reducing the likelihoods of these situations happening.
Okay, well, on the point about the air pollution and child health issue, I think our knowledge on child health and the impact of air pollution is actually rising exponentially. So it's almost every month or so we see a new paper. We've known for a few decades that adults with heart problems are at increased risk. People with asthma, there's the increased risk of stroke and cardiac arrest. The data on children is relatively new, and we now know that children are even harmed before they are born. So particulate matter has been identified in placentas of babies or mothers. We know that air pollution is impairing, is producing low birth weight pregnancies and prematurity. And we know that overall child development is impacted by air pollution, including lung development. So not only do children with healthy lungs suffer from the impacts of air pollution, but the actual development of the lung itself in very young children is impaired. So they don't even get to that point where they have a healthy lung to start with. And that's something that the government really has to take on board.
But why aren't they? This is madness. Like, we're talking about children and people like and younger people. We keep talking about future generations. Inevitably, we were children once. A lot of these issues are going to have had an impact on us, on our bodies now. This is a current issue that's still affecting people. I know people have had to move out of London, for example, because their bodies just can't take the pollution. They get sick, they get ill over time. Like the build-up of that inevitably causes more illness, more suffering. Like, why are governments not taking heed?
Well, there's a lot of vested interest in fossil fuels, and a lot of people are still getting extremely rich from exploiting fossil fuels.
JPMorgan,
we're standing right next to one of the chief bodies that is, they don't invest in fossil fuels for the good of their health or the good of our health. They invest in fossil fuels to make money. And until that situation shifts, until our financial system is not based on an oil economy, then they will not change. I can't see how they would change. They've switched their accounting system, so it looks as though they're moving to a more sustainable exploitation of fossil fuels. But really, how can that make any sense? We should not be. We can't even use our existing supplies of oil, identified supplies of oil, safely. So how can you possibly justify investment in new exploration, new exploitation of fossil fuels? So what we need is a radical change. We need government to take a long-term view. We need to address those vested interests, and clearly we need systemic change. We need a change that recognises that our economy should be run for the benefit of people, not for the benefit of a few companies who make massive profits. And this is not to. We're not here to target those people that work in the building necessarily, but the people that are at the top, the board members, and the people that JPMorgan invest in. So that is the change that we need. We need to drive change at the very top. We need to rethink our economics so they're not oil-based, and we need to rethink our economic system, which drives this consumerist approach. We need to look at how we can address the needs of people rather than the needs of profit.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else you wanted to say? That's always a difficult question to ask, isn't it?
I think very shortly, the UK, excuse me, the UK has got itself into the position of hosting the COP later this year, and in order for that to have any chance of success, then who else other than the host of the COP needs to start showing some leadership? Because if we don't, why would people turn up to the COP? What possible benefit would there be? So the UK government really has to start showing leadership. Boris Johnson has to step forward and get involved in this process, and we need to come up with some very clear messages, talking about drilling for more oil in the North Sea on the Cambo oil field, or opening another coal mine in the UK, undermines that position of potential leadership. It's really not what we should be doing in the run to the COP.
Thank you very much. I agree with you. Hashtag Stop Cambo is a thing that's gaining traction, and we need to put a spotlight together with other organisations like Greenpeace that are doing that too, to say, Stop Cambo is the thing for all of us. Like, this is a health crisis, guys. Look at this. There's so many doctors here. These are people we respect. Look at them. Look at these are people you've probably seen. They've probably healed you. These are people who you probably have so much to be thankful for. Well, I definitely am. Thank you very much. Thank you. Are we going to keep looking around? Let's have a look at, let's see where we are. So, as I said, we are in Canary Wharf. We are right next to this enormous building that houses JPMorgan. And JPMorgan, everybody, is the world's largest investor in fossil fuels. The world's largest investor in fossil fuels. What has happened when we've hit the heart of climate crisis propagation? You see doctors, medical professionals here, doctors, psychiatrists, occupational therapists, nurses, midwives. You see them manhandled, ignored. I've never seen such a heavy-handed police presence in these spaces. Our right to protest, our right to change the outcome for this health crisis, or the climate crisis, is hugely under threat now. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep going round and see if we can speak to anybody that's walking amongst the people. Ooh. Oh, thank you. Lovely. Some of the doctors here are giving out food, making sure everyone's fed and watered, the doctory way. Hi, would you mind talking to me? Is that okay with anyone here? Mind talking to me? Not to worry if not, that's absolutely okay. I could just see the stethoscopes. It's looks very authoritative. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, anyone saying anything is wonderful. Like, you're all here for a reason. You got manhandled by the police for a bloody good reason, and that is to put a spotlight on the fact that this stupid company. How would that imagine being a member of JPMorgan, or one of the the UK, one of those people facilitating JPMorgan. How embarrassing is that?
Well, I think they're just very divorced from the reality, and maybe they don't know the facts, because I think the facts are very well obscured and hidden. Although it's very interesting to see JPMorgan's own internal report called Risky Business that highlights the fact that they were actually aware of how duplicitous they are being. They know the damage that's been done by extracting fossil fuels, and they are, as we know, the world's biggest funder of fossil fuel extraction, and yet they continue to do so. And the reason we're here as doctors and healthcare professionals is because the climate crisis is a public health crisis.
Yes.
It's affecting all of us. It's potential to affect huge numbers of people.
We're just going to move the camera a bit closer to you because the microphone is having trouble, from my understanding. So I'm just going to untangle this.
Good luck.
I know. This is what happens when everything happens as fast as it did today. So maybe we can unplug. I know so many. One's my information one. One's my connect old one that's battered and doesn't really work. So I'm just going to hold. I'm Well, how does it make you feel that we now know as many facts about the climate crisis as we do, and about we know a lot about the fact that this company is massively investing in fossil fuels. How does that make you feel as a GP? You've got that on your top. You're dealing with the medical side of the climate crisis that a lot of people don't see until it's too late. So how do you feel about that?
I mean, so it's abundantly clear that the climate crisis is a health crisis, and we're seeing the effects in terms of habitat loss and rising sea levels with the temperature rises. And alongside things like air pollution, it affects us all. And so it's incumbent on us as healthcare professionals to do something about it. I'm here to advocate on behalf of my patients. It's part of our duty of care. When we see an imminent risk to patients or a population, it's our duty to act. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you very much. What would you say to anyone at home, as a GP, a person of authority? What would you advise they do to protect their own health?
I think number one is find out, educate yourself about what's really going on. Don't trust people like JPMorgan who have a vested interest in extracting fossil fuels, but find out what's actually going on in terms of the climate crisis. Talk to people, talk to your communities, talk to your healthcare professionals, find out what you can do to limit your reliance on fossil fuels. I think if everyone does their bit, it will look different for different people. Some people are able to give up foreign holidays, other people are able to buy an electric car, other people aren't able to do that. But there is something that all of us can do. It might be by changing your diet, eating less meat perhaps. It might be changing the way you travel. There are numbers of ways that we can all help.
And by doing those things, you protect your own health and the health of us all. So thank you very much for talking to us. And I'm sorry that you were manhandled in the way that you were today. I think it says a lot about the state of of this world that we're living in. I don't know about you, but I lived for the longest time. Oh, you up for talking? Yeah? Oh, fantastic. I'm so pleased. So you don't, unlike some of the others, you don't have a label on you.
I'm an anaesthetic doctor.
Oh, amazing. That's a word I can't say, so I'm so pleased that you said it for me. Could you give me your take on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that extreme weather events are happening all around us, and this summer has been like such an important time for that. We've seen it, happen in Greek wildfires. We've seen the US, obviously in New York, has just had this huge flooding. And London has seen that this year, and I work at Whipps Cross Hospital, and our hospital was flooded, and a number of the theatres and the operating theatres couldn't work because of that flooding, and some of them have been out of operation for weeks. So, of course, what everyone else is just saying, that we need to look at the ways that we can handle this in so many different ways, but actually this is happening to us now, and it's affecting us now, and it's affecting us in London. So it is really, really important that we do something about it.
Thank you so much for saying that. And really, I think when we talk about this, you're wearing a mask, probably because of the COVID pandemic. Thank you for wearing that. I would say that when everyone knew about the COVID pandemic, we know how people wanted to protect their own health. So you've got people wearing masks now that wouldn't have been before. You've got people everyone's stocked up on toilet roll, though that was a bit rubbish, as some people doing that. But we saw people really acting on what they knew to be true. If you knew that this was having, and the thought of some of our hospitals going down during the COVID pandemic is quite something, isn't it? So if you think about the climate crisis exacerbating not only extreme weather events and also pollution levels and also all cancer levels and things like that, they're exacerbating the health crisis on so many levels.
It's affecting the health systems that we work in. It's not just affecting the health of the population. It's about how we deliver that healthcare.
So, from your opinion, how urgent is needing to look at this and address it?
It's extremely urgent. We were just talking about that just now. Like, these weather events are happening so much more frequently. We're running out of time.
Hopefully, we haven't run out. Thank you so much. Now, I want to really express the hope that is here, as tragic and appalling as it is that people are being treated in the way they are today. I think it's important to recognise that they're here because they do feel like this is the last hope. And so if we can get attention on it by coming here in our scrubs, you are not in an episode of Grey's Anatomy now, I promise you. Instead, you are outside JPMorgan, the world's biggest investor in fossil fuels, investing in 100 different countries. They call themselves, they say, we aim to be the most respected financial services firm in the world, serving corporations and individuals in more than 100 companies. What do you think? Do you think they're a respected financial services firm? Do you think they're the most respected in the world? I certainly would not say so. Let us know what you think, and let them know what you think, more importantly. If they feel embarrassed, if they feel their reputation is damaged, if they feel that people are not on their side, then perhaps they might recognise that it's time to change. The time to change was 30 years ago, but now's better than never at all. On their website, they have the audacity to be talking about the impact of the climate crisis. Have a look, you'll see it on their front page. Well, they're clearly not heeding what they know to be true. It's one of those companies, unfortunately, that is very aware of the climate crisis. They're not burying their head in the sand. They know, but these places spend millions and millions and millions, billions probably, but I did just make that up, so a lot of money on subterfuge, essentially, and greenwashing. Greenwashing is pretending that you're doing something when really that thing is not proportionate to any sort of level of sustainability. So greenwashing, look it up, it's really important. There's a lot of that goes on in the UK, and this company is hugely responsible for that. Now we're just going to step over here with the doctors in the background and see if we can talk to one of the doctors who've been speaking with the police today. Dr. Helen Angel, can I speak to you for a second? Is that okay? Yes. Hello. Now, we've spoken before. Yeah, that would be really great, because then I can hear you a bit better. Yeah. You've been dealing with the police today. Is there anyone still over there?
There are 2 people glued on the pavement.
Okay. And who are those people? Could you tell me?
They're doctors. No, they're health professionals.
Okay, amazing. And why are they glued on there? For anyone who's just tuning in and they're not sure what's happening.
To bring attention to what JPMorgan is doing, in that they're funding more fossil fuels, which will exacerbate climate change. In fact, since the Paris Agreement, they've put $317 billion into fossil fuel investments since the Paris Agreement. So they're actually the bank that funds fossil fuels more than any other bank, and that's why we've chosen them to bring attention to that. That, you know, we have even if we use the oil that's already in production, we're going to go over 1.5 degrees, which isn't even safe. We're not even there yet, and we're already getting climate change. But if we go to 2 degrees, we'll get serious damage around the planet. So investing in new fossil fuel is going to take it above 2 degrees. And there's absolutely no need to do so, because we can transition to a fossil fuel-free economy. It's just that there isn't the political will or corporate will to transition to a fossil fuel economy. And fossil-free economy.
I just want to pull a few of those things that you just said out of what you said, because I think we just really need to reiterate those. So that is more than £300 billion invested. $1 billion invested. That's madness.
Since the Paris Agreement in 2016.
Wow. So, oh my goodness, that's ridiculous numbers. You talked about how there's 2 people over there that are healthcare professionals still glued on. If you're watching and you're a bit confused, they've got shields up at the moment outside the front of JPMorgan to prevent people from seeing this. That is quite something. If they don't want people to see enough that they're going to put shields up, you can imagine what reputational damage seeing stuff like this will have on them. So please share this video. These are healthcare professionals that are being ignored here. If we ignore them, who else are we going to ignore? We've already ignored the scientists. These are the people who look after us. I've got Dr. Helen Angel here. You've been very involved in some of the outreach that's been happening so far. You've also been talking to the police. Normally, I would try and not focus on the police, because ultimately this is bigger than a few police officers and vests removing people. But I would say that this treatment of healthcare professionals has been particularly shocking today, because these are the people that they rely on too, especially. You can kind of, although I think it is equally appalling, you can see why a police officer might find it difficult to associate themselves with or recognise the need to protect somebody who they have no connection to. The doctors, midwives, nurses, occupational therapists, psychiatrists, and more that are here today. Anaesthetists, said the word this time, very hard to say. They are all people that these police officers that are dragging them away rely on. They have a connection to these people, and to see them be treated so badly in the face of this health crisis says a lot, I think. What has been your experience today in the protests? Have you been shocked by what's happened?
Very shocked. I mean, all these people are so committed within their work, but they're also so committed because they know of the dangers of climate crisis and how dire it will be if this continues. And we're trying to protect ourselves, our children, our grandchildren from the effects of what these companies are doing. Now, this is private property. The pavements and everything are private property. So the police have come, but I'm not exactly sure what's going on because everything is being handled by the security of JPMorgan, and we were forcibly removed. And I'm concerned about the two people that are glued on because we weren't able to stay and make sure that of their welfare. We weren't. As I say, I've got a jacket on to say that I'm actually here to make sure that they're protected, and I was forcibly removed. I wasn't lying down, I was just staying close to them to make sure that they were okay. I was forcibly removed. Then I've been watching from afar, and then they've put these fences around them. We can't see what's happening. So I spoke to the police and said, are you watching what's happening? Because we're concerned what's happening in there. We don't know, and we want to make sure that they're not, mishandled in any way. The whole situation isn't mishandled, or we're concerned about their welfare because we can't even watch and see what's happening. So the police officer said that they're not inside that barrier, but they said they can see through it, but I can't see through it. She said you've got police officers there, but the police officers are actually standing looking at us, not looking at the people who are glued on. So I am concerned. We don't know what's happening.
How hopeful does it? Honestly, I'm just hearing you, and it's just so hard not to get upset listening to you talk about what you're talking about, because I just have so much respect for healthcare workers. I have so much respect for everybody who takes a stand in this movement. But just as you're saying this, I'm replaying the images of these people that would have cared and honestly saved so many lives themselves on an individual basis, be dragged by their shoulders out, saying, you're hurting me, like, stop. All of those things are playing in my head, and I really hope that the healthcare professionals that are in there right now are not being mistreated. Please come and show your outrage too, because this is outrageous. We're in Canary Wharf, and we're outside JPMorgan, the company that are investing more in fossil fuels than any other. This is new fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are exacerbating the climate crisis. The climate crisis are infecting people in the UK right now. Dr. Helen Angel, you said, you were talking to me last time we were talking about the impact that was having on lives of people here. Could you summarise some of that for me now? How the climate crisis is affecting public health?
Already affecting people in the UK?
Yeah.
Well, our air pollution is very high, so we're getting 99,000 people per year dying due to for respiratory problems due to air pollution. Our air pollution standards are well above what WHO recommended standards, and the government is ignoring the WHO standards, actually. And we had one case of a child where the coroner actually said the cause of death was air pollution.
And that's just one case that was really heavily investigated, got a lot of media attention, and that was a big part of the reason why it was able to even come to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is basically fossil fuels being burnt is causing particulate matter and various gases that are actually causing respiratory problems. We're seeing increasing amount of childhood asthma due to air pollution, and particularly in more deprived areas where there's more pollution.
Outrageous. That's absolutely outrageous. Do you have hope for the future? Can we give anyone hope watching this? Because frankly, it's been a bit depressing.
Actually, if you look at what is actually happening over the last 40 years since we've known the climate change is happening, and all the agreements, all the big conferences, all the agreements that's been signed, actually carbon is going up. It's still accelerating. It's not made any difference what anybody has done. It's just simply been so trivial compared to the magnitude of the problem that it's actually still accelerating. We're not even slowing down this situation. So if you look at what's actually happening, it's completely dire. There's no hope. We're going into 4 degrees. It's going to be tremendous upheaval, sea rise. And it's already started. You're seeing floods and fire everywhere. So the way it is right now, there's no hope. The only hope is that things will change, that the governments will act and make a difference and will stop this, that the companies will transition to a fossil-free economy. And it's possible to do it. It will create jobs. It will create a good economy. The UK could stand out in the world for coming forward in this. They would be cheered on for it. The economy would be boosted if we go to a fossil-free economy. It would actually improve things. So I just find there's no logic in what is happening. The governments are not acting and that corporations are not changing away from fossil fuels. It's absolutely, millions will die. Billions will die if something isn't done. And that's why we're here on the streets trying to bring attention to this. Because if we just write letters and stay all nice, they're not going to do anything. So we're getting desperate. As health professionals, we're getting desperate because we know the suffering that is already happening. We know the suffering that's going to happen. I worked in the Solomon Islands for 5 years as a medical officer. There are islands that are actually under the water now because sea rise is higher in those areas, and those islands have gone underwater, and the culture of those people on those islands is lost. There's a very specific culture in an area where I used to work, where they had a very, very specific culture, and they're very low-lying islands, and that they've had to be removed from their islands and change their whole way of life.
Yes, I'm not sure what else we can say. We're going to wrap up very soon, but there is definitely no wrapping up going on here. These doctors are here with the code red signs, trying to say, look. How many more people do we need to stand here with to say, look? Do we need someone from JP Morgan's offices to come down with a sign on their body saying, look? Do you really think that the people in there have no recognition of the health crisis that's going on? What can we do? What can we do? What more can we do? Ask these people. A great mobilization that I heard from somebody was, look, we need to make in some way these people famous, because ultimately we talk about these big corporations like JPMorgan investing more in fossil fuels than any other company, this thing that's exacerbating the climate crisis to no end. We talk about all of these things. Well, we can do something about it, and we can highlight the people behind these big corporations that have a part to play. No passing the buck here. We all have a responsibility to do what we can. For some people, like the people in the higher end of JP Morgan, they have a much bigger part to play because their impact is so enormous. The communities they're destroying, the people's lives they're destroying, your life they will probably be destroying right now because of the complete negligence that they're exhibiting right now. So we are going to leave you with these doctors here. We've got Dr. Helen Angel here. If you're unsure, if you just tuned in, you wanted to say something else? Dr. Helen,
I wanted to say because the companies are obliged to make a profit beyond anything else, and that means that they're making profit. Their only concentration is on making profit. They have no legal obligation to require them to take care of their customers or their staff, in the sense that profit is their primary objective. And because the primary objective is profit, they're not looking at the bigger picture. And we actually need to change that law.
We need to change that. And who better to say that than a doctor who has a vested interest? And do you take an oath as a doctor? I think you do, don't you? Or some sort of promise that you'll look after people's health. Yes. And these are the people that I want to hear from, the people who want to protect us. I have no interest in hearing the financial woes of a company that's financial investments are causing absolute devastation. I want to hear from them, but I want to hear them say, we're not going to do this anymore. We recognise that this is a health crisis. We recognise how many lives we're destroying. We don't want to do this anymore. That's what we want. That's in Extinction Rebellion. We have 3 key demands: tell the truth, act on that truth, create a citizens' assembly. We cannot do any of those things without holding those people to account. They are not telling the truth. They are not acting on the truth. They are not acting as if the truth is real. And if we cannot do that, then unfortunately, these people's jobs get harder because they have to look after these crumbling bodies that are crumbling as a result of complete climate negligence. We only have one planet. There is no planet B. You hear all of these things that people are saying. You might be able to jump on a spaceship to Mars if you're a very wealthy person. But how long is that going to last? Do you really want that life? How many of us are going to be able to come with you? Not very many people, I suspect. We're in Canary Wharf, outside JP Morgan, the company investing more in fossil fuels than any other company. This is the centre of corruption. We've seen police behave appallingly today. We've seen protesters, well, I say protesters, yes, absolutely, people protesting, medical professionals, from social prescribers, midwives. I'm reading people's t-shirts here, anaesthetists, to GPs, to doctors, to nurses, to occupational therapists, psychiatrists, people who are impacted at their work now by the climate crisis, by recognising the severity of this. So we're going to wrap up now, but we are still here. Please show your support in whatever way you can. If you're not here, if you're not in London, that's okay. You don't have to be in London. Unfortunately, this seems to be the source of a lot of where the support for this is happening. So that's why this upheaval is happening from this space. But there are people here from all sorts of different parts of England. Everybody is welcome. Yes, people might be disproportionately affected by the climate crisis and the health crisis that is linked with that, and the social injustice that is, of course, interwoven with that. But we can do this from anywhere we are. Remote rebels are important. There's loads of different organisations you can join. You can email places like this. If you have an email account, if you have a phone that you can use, if you have a media that you associate with, what press do you read? What do you look at? What do you look at every day that you think could make a difference? Contact anybody you can. But keep saying it. Share this video if you can. This is incredibly moving today. We're talking to people that care about your health, and therefore we should be listening, because we all have a vested interest in our own health. Your body is your temple is something that you hear a lot. Well, if you follow that, if you have any sort of sanctity for human life, please heed the calls of these doctors. They're standing here on the street trying to get people's attention today, trying to speak to everybody that they can and say, look, let's do something together. So thank you very much for joining in the stream today. I'm Alice. These surrounding me, these people here, are people in the medical profession across the board, people who have experience in the climate crisis breakdown and what that is doing to our health. This can be stopped. There's a lot that can be done. We are in code red. Let's do something. And let's just listen. Just let's do something. Let's listen to what they have to say. I'm so sorry. It's really hard to...
I heard you talking about why the health professionals weren't doing more.
Yeah.
In May 2019, the UK declared a climate emergency. Since then, more and more people around the world have woken up to the climate and ecological crisis, putting ever-growing pressure on the people in power. They have started to act. Not acting as in taking climate action, but acting as in role-playing politics, acting as saviors, playing with words, trying to convince us that everything is taken care of.
Pretending to change while they continue pretty much exactly as before. Pretending to wage war against fossil fuel while opening brand new coal mines, oil fields and pipelines. Pretending to have the most ambitious climate policies, bragging about these so-called ambitious climate targets, which are vastly insufficient, by the way, and then get caught for not even trying to reach these targets.
Pretending to care about science while holding climate summits without inviting a single climate scientist. Pretending to care about nature and biodiversity while the world cuts down a forest area the size of a football field every second. Pretending to build back better even as astronomical sums of money are already locked in to dirty projects.
Billions more is being spent on fossil fuels than on clean energy. Those in power compensate with beautiful words and promises that someone in the future will somehow undo their actions and make them net zero. With more and more extreme weather raging all around us, the gap between actions and words is becoming impossible to ignore.
2021 is forecasted to be the second highest rise in emissions to date. The people of this planet are no longer going to fall for the lies of those in power. The climate crisis is something that is not in the distant future. It is here, now, and every delay will make it worse.
We have tried asking nicely. We have tried writing to our MPs,
signing petitions and everything else. None of it has worked. So together, we must take to the streets. Come and join us as we demand they stop the harm and halt all new investment in the fossil fuel industry. We can win this. We must win this.